Picture a world where a single logo can cost more than a used car. A world where people wait months just for the privilege of dropping 5 figures on a piece of canvas. Today, Louis Vuitton is the undisputed king of the luxury jungle. A $30 billion empire that defines what it means to flex. But if you strip away the neon lights of the Champs-Élysées and the celebrity endorsements, you find a story that's low-key terrifying. This isn't just about fashion. It's a survival horror story that starts with a kid who had absolutely nothing. No money, no shoes, no hope. Just a 225-mile walk into the unknown. The year was 1821. In a tiny, middle-of-nowhere village in France called Angers, a boy named Louis was born into a life of straight-up grind. His family were farmers and hat makers, and they were struggling hard. By the time Louis was 6, he wasn't playing with toys, he was stockpiling firewood and working the fields from dawn till dusk. Then, the world broke him. At age 10, his mother died. His father remarried fast, and according to every record we have, his new stepmother was a nightmare. She was manipulative, controlling, and made his life a living hell. At 13, Louis decided he'd rather die on the road than live another day in that house. He didn't pack a bag, he didn't say goodbye. He just walked out into the night and started heading toward Paris. Paris was 225 miles away. Think about that. No car, no bus, no map. Just a teenager walking on dirt roads for 3 straight years. He was homeless, sleeping in the woods with nothing but a cloak to keep him from freezing to death. Every village he hit, he'd beg for work, breaking stones, weaving, or working with wood, just to get a few coins for a piece of bread. He was basically a ghost, drifting through France, but he was picking up a savage set of skills. He learned how to handle metal, stone, and fabric. He was becoming a master of materials before he even knew what he was going to build with them. By the time he finally rolled into Paris, the city was vibrating with change. The first railway lines were opening, and for the first time in history, people were traveling long distances. But there was a massive problem. Their luggage was trash. Rich people traveled with their entire lives, paintings, instruments, fancy dresses, and they were using heavy leather boxes that were a nightmare to pack. Louis landed a gig as an apprentice for a guy named Monsieur Maréchal, a high-end box maker and packer. This was the turning point. Louis wasn't just making boxes, he was solving a logistics crisis. He became so good at it that he wasn't just a laborer anymore, he was a specialist. And then he got the ultimate clout. The Empress of France, Eugénie, heard about this kid's talent and appointed him as her personal boxmaker. Imagine going from sleeping in a forest to working in the palace. Louis had officially leveled up. In 1854, Louis decided to bet on himself and opened his own shop. He looked at the industry and realized everyone was doing it wrong. Luggage back then had dome-shaped tops so rain would roll off, but you couldn't stack them. Loading a carriage or a train took forever. Louis went into the lab and experimented with a new material, canvas. It was lighter, tougher, and more water-resistant than leather. Most importantly, it allowed him to make trunks with flat tops. You could stack them like bricks. It sounds simple, but it was a total game-changer. It was the birth of modern luggage. Within 2 years, his trunks weren't just gear, they were a status symbol for the global elite. But just when he was sitting on top of the world, the floor fell out. 1870. The Franco-Prussian War erupted. Louis and his family had to flee their home and workshop, ending up in a cramped refugee shelter in Paris. Food was so scarce they almost starved. When the war ended and Louis went back to his shop, it was a crime scene. His tools were gone, his materials were stolen, and his life's work was in ruins. He was 50 years old and homeless for the second time. Most people would have quit. Louis didn't. He took his last savings and opened a new shop in the most expensive part of Paris, right next to the Grand Hotel and the railway station. He knew where the money was. He introduced a new striped pattern to stop people from biting his style, and the brand came back even stronger. When Louis died at 72, his son Georges took the torch and ran with it. Georges was a marketing genius. He took the brand to America and met John Wanamaker, the guy who basically invented the department store. But Georges' biggest contribution was an act of love. He created a new design in honor of his father, the LV monogram. It was a floral pattern with those interlocking initials we see everywhere today. It was revolutionary, and it turned a simple bag into a piece of art. He also invented the tumbler lock, a system so secure he literally challenged Harry Houdini to try and break it. The brand was untouchable, until the shadows of history returned. World War II is the chapter the company doesn't like to talk about. When the Nazis occupied Paris, most luxury brands were forced to shut down. But Louis Vuitton, now under Louis' grandson Gaston, stayed open. According to researchers, the brand allegedly collaborated with the Vichy regime, even producing commemorative busts for the Nazi-backed leaders. While other designers were being crushed, LV had a glamorous shop in the center of the occupation. The company has since called this ancient history, but it's a dark stain on the monogram that no amount of polish can fully remove. After the war, the family started fighting. Gaston's sons were divided, and the business began to stagnate. They eventually brought in their sister's husband, Henri Racamier, a savvy businessman who turned the whole operation upside down. He moved them from wholesale to retail and started opening stores all over Asia. Sales exploded from $20 million to nearly $1 billion. But in the late 80s, a new player entered the game, a man they call the Wolf in Cashmere. Bernard Arnault. Arnault was a property developer who saw a weakness in the company's management. He was brought in as an ally, but he had his own plans. He secretly started buying up shares, building a controlling interest until he had enough power to stage a hostile takeover. He dragged the family through a brutal legal battle and eventually kicked Racamier out. For the first time in over 100 years, no one with the name Vuitton was running the show. Arnault didn't care about tradition. He cared about global domination. He hired Marc Jacobs, started doing wild collaborations with artists like Takashi Murakami, and turned LV into a pop culture juggernaut. Today, every single LV bag is a testament to an insane level of perfectionism. Craftsmen have to train for 2 years before they're even allowed to touch a product. Some pieces go through 300 separate stages of assembly. If a bag isn't perfect, they don't put it on sale. They destroy it to maintain the brand's exclusivity. It's a machine designed to create desire, run by the wealthiest man on the planet. We see the gold, the leather, and the celebrities, but we forget the dirt. We forget the 13-year-old kid sleeping in the woods, walking toward a city that didn't want him. Louis Vuitton isn't just a luxury brand, it's the ultimate hustle. It's a story of survival, betrayal, and a monogram that was forged in the fire of 2 world wars and a corporate bloodbath. The next time you see those interlocking letters, don't just see a price tag. See the 225 miles of grit it took to get there. Because in the world of high fashion, the most expensive thing you can own isn't the bag. It's the history that's baked into every stitch. And that history, it's a lot darker and a lot more savage than they'll ever tell you in the showroom.